Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to a very special episode of We Watch Shudder. My name is Michelle, and who's here with me?
It's JD.
It's JD. It's always JD.
Except for that one time it was Stefano.
Stefano. And then another time that it was Jacque, but they don't know that story yet.
No, they do not, Fifi. They do not.
Jacque and Fifi.
What a time it was.
It absolutely was, and we are not going to tell you, the audience, about it. This is a bonus episode coming out in December. Usually we release an episode once a week covering the latest exclusive and or original movie to come out on Shudder. Shudder. Come out on Shudder, which is a horror adjacent streaming service. But since we had almost reviewed all the 2022 movies with our Spooktober releases, we decided, hey, may as well record them and release the rest of them just so we can do a nice little 2022 recap at the end of December. What are we covering today, Stefano?
You still aren't pronouncing it right. It's
I know.
You jerk. No, today we are, for the second week in a row with our bonus episode, talking about a documentary film. And that documentary is called Boris Karloff, The Man Behind the Monster. And that title pretty much tells you what this is. This is a documentary about the life and career of Boris Karloff, who is, of course, most famously known as the man who played the monster in the original Frankenstein film, directed by James Whale back in 1931, I believe is when that came out. Michelle, do you want to read the... guys,
very short description?
Here's the thing. This one might be a quick one. I'm just going to put that out there. Michelle, you wanna read that description for us from the Shudder website? Tell these people what it says that's different from what I just told them vaguely?
Yep. So the description says, Karloff, examining his illustrious 60-year career in the entertainment industry and his endearing legacy as one of the icons of 20th century popular culture. A Shudder exclusive. That was not even a full sentence. That is what we call a fragment. Where is, so Karloff is the subject. Where is the verb of what Karloff is doing? I'm upset.
The English teachers around the world are furious at the poor grammar on display. I mean, I guess it's spoiler free, but then again, can you spoil a documentary? I don't know.
Yeah, if you haven't seen Frankenstein from 1931, we're going to spoil it. I don't know when Boris Karloff died, but it's been a while, so you've probably seen the stuff in his catalog that you wanted to see by now. We're just going to spoil a couple things about Boris Karloff in general, so there's not going to be a spoiler section of this. It's really hard to have a spoiler section of a documentary. They're just facts of the life, and you just can't spoil that.
Let's hit the scores right off the bat here, Michelle, with just a few summary thoughts. Like what was your overall impression of Boris Karloff, the man behind the monster?
So my impression
he died in 1969, so it's been a while.
It's outside the realm of spoiling things that are new releases at this point. Unless he's going to release an album post-mortem like a couple musical artists have. I hope someday we get the Boris Karloff rap album that we've all been waiting for. My thoughts on the documentary were it was fine. I don't really have any complaints. There were a couple things that I found interesting. It's very factual, a little bit dry. I didn't love it. I probably won't watch it for a third time because this was the second time that I watched it. I'm going to go with a 2.75.
Yeah, I have no major complaints about this at all, right? But it is what it is. What I would say about this movie is if you like horror movies and maybe you're new to horror movies, maybe you're a younger person who's just getting into things, and you know Boris Karloff by name and reputation, you'd like to learn more about him, but maybe you know you're not good with books, you got some ADHD or some dyslexia, or maybe you just don't like sitting and reading books. That's a perfectly fair person to be. this is a really good summation of the man's life and his career, the importance of what he did. But beyond that, it's like there's also not a whole lot of real, like there's no exciting surprises or like, oh, you didn't know he was like a spy for the English in World War I and was a famous assassin, or it's just a well-told biographical portrait of a person's life. And as such, for me, it can only be so good. But I'm going to give it a 3.5. I thought for what it was as good as it could possibly be.
Okay, sounds good. So that comes out to 3.125 skulls out of 5 is what we are giving this movie. Okay, that's the episode. Bye.
Yeah, Michelle and I were talking before we hit record that this one may end up being our very shortest episode ever, and not because, again, the movie is not bad. It's a perfect example of what it is. There is one thing though that I wanted to bring up to you, Michelle. I mentioned this. I did a little research just about the production of the film. Was looking on IMDb and Wikipedia and things. And I found something in the Wikipedia entry about this movie that I then cross-referenced, and it came from an article in Variety about this movie. The fella who directed this movie, Mr. Thomas Hamilton, apparently worked on this film for 23 years. 23 years. And what that tells me is that this is 1,000,000% a complete labor of love. This is a movie that this guy basically put his free time and his spare money and whatever effort he could, and he spent time researching and taking the time he needed to be able to get the interviews he wanted. And it wasn't anything that he, at least this is my impression when I hear he spent 23 years on this. And that's the impression I get, is this is just a very much a labor of love about a guy who wanted to tell the story of Boris Karloff. And that I find very impressive and respectable. But then there's also a part of me that's just like, oh, there should have been more here then. This is the rare time, probably the only time you will ever hear me say, I wish this movie was longer. I wish there was more here. It felt like very much like we just kind of scratched the surface. And I don't know if that was intentional or what. Here's what I know. This movie was released to coincide with the 90th anniversary of Frankenstein, of course. Came out originally in 2021. So I don't know if it was something that they put him to work on 20 years in advance. Why would you plan for a 90th anniversary? I don't think that's what it is. I think he just had this, but I don't know. I don't know if he was maybe restricted and was told that he could do it and it would be part of this thing, but it could only be a certain length, or what. This is the rare movie where I wish there was more.
That's very surprising, because nothing about this felt like a deep delve. It didn't feel incredibly detailed. There was a lot of exclusive information. I understand that he definitely got some interviews that the average person would have a hard time reaching out to, like Boris Karloff's daughter, but then he also has big names like Guillermo del Toro in there. So he definitely got some big names, and I guess some exclusive interviews that way, but I didn't really listen to a lot of this and think wow, that's very surprising information. It's not like the Guar documentary that we covered, where I felt just astounded by what I learned. So yeah, that is very, very interesting. That was a 23-year project, unless it's also like a Phil Tippett thing where he worked on it for a while and then went, oh no, I gotta put this away for 20 years.
No, and like I said, I feel like this was probably something that he was doing as a passion project, right? This is something that he was obviously I got to take jobs and do other things, but this is the thing I'm going to be constantly working on, because this, and I have a ton of respect for that. So I guess let me ask you a couple of questions to maybe get a little good content for the folks in here. Is there anything from was there anything from the story that you found like particularly surprising or interesting? What did you feel was like was there any moment in this where you were just like, oh man, that's what drew you in the most is I think what I'm trying to ask.
It's really easy for me to answer that because there's one part that I was fascinated about as opposed to every other part of the documentary. And that was Boris's reaction to Frankenstein, the little girl scene of throwing her into the lake or the river or the body of water. In case people haven't seen the original Frankenstein movie, there is a part where he encounters a little girl who is playing by herself, and she's throwing something into the water, I believe rocks or something. Flowers into the water. So she's throwing those in the water, and Frankenstein, not thinking clearly, picks her up and throws her into the water. What? Oh, sorry, Frankenstein's monster. Sorry. I can't believe I did that. Yep. I'm just full of mistakes lately. But Frankenstein's monster, whose name was also Frankenstein, little known fact, he named him after... No, I'm kidding. But Frankenstein's monster picks up the little girl, throws her into the body of the water, and then realizes that, oh no, I am killing this little girl. And it's this really heartbreaking part of the movie that really gives you a lot of humanity behind, the monster. And Boris didn't like that. He thought it was too brutal to show on screen. And I just want to know how he would feel about modern horror and a lot of other scenes, because that is so tame. So I was really fascinated by that, but also just like the changes that they did, particularly to that scene, because it was too much for people.
Yeah, I found that very interesting, like how much he did not want to do that. He didn't think it fit. I definitely understand his arguments, but yeah, that was an interesting moment of just like, man, considering some of the things they do to children these days, a Serbian film, I can't even imagine. Also,
that is such. I just watched Frankenstein for the first time in its entirety pretty recently, before we watched this documentary, and that was one of my favorite scenes from the movie overall. So I think that's why when they talked about it in the documentary, I was very fascinated, because I thought it gave us such a human angle to this creature that we're kind of frightened of, or supposed to be afraid of the rest of the movie, but to see that regret and the fact that this wasn't an intentional act of violence.
It was very much an act of naivete, right? What you have here is an infant in a grown man's body, so it definitely adds layers to the story overall, and I as a fan, I do think that is I think there's value in that scene, and I'm glad it's a part of the movie. But I also definitely understand where he was coming from, because especially like 1931, the movies as a whole are really kind of new still, and just like the idea of being like even remotely violent to a child on screen had to just be anathema at that time. I can't even imagine.
Was there anything that you absolutely found fascinating about the movie outside of that part?
One of the biggest things that jumped out at me about this, there are two things that I wanted to mention, and you very cleverly deduced that I asked you that question because I myself wanted to answer that question.
You told me that's what you did in a different episode, that you asked questions that you already have an answer to.
I sure do. First of all, I had no idea how significantly he was involved in the founding of the Screen Actors Guild, and how much he was passionately behind like working actors' rights, like bit players and contract actors and that sort of thing. I just I'm it's a bleeding heart woke ass liberal who believes in people's rights, and anyway, I thought that was super interesting. I didn't know that, so it was just a bit about his history that I really appreciated. And then the other thing that I found so interesting, because I have a parallel to it, is they talk about how he had done a lot of damage to his back working for railroad companies for a while, and then did significantly more damage to his back during the production of Frankenstein, maybe strictly out of the maliciousness of James Whale. They talk about that one scene where they forced him to carry that heavy load up the hill like 30 times or something. But then they talk about later on when he was doing variety shows and such on early TV and that sort of thing, and how he would just he'd be backstage and he could barely move and he was just in complete agony. And the instant the curtain opened and he walked out, you would never guess there was anything wrong with him. Like, he transformed and did everything he needed to do. And then the moment he's off stage, he almost collapses, right? He's just gone. And just that idea of that, interestingly, the place where I've heard that exact story before is in professional wrestling. With guys who are so beat up and so hurt, but just that idea of they're so committed to the art and so committed to being an entertainer, and it's a really journeyman kind of workman-like attitude of, well, it's time to go to work, guys. These people paid their money to see a show, and I can't go out there and look like I'm in pain and barely move. We got to do it. It's time to go to work. And I'm always impressed by that. It's almost inhuman. And I thought that was a really interesting bit of the story as well. I just a couple of interesting things that I didn't know because, I know Boris Karloff's work, but I've never gone out of my way to dig into his life. And so, I thought there were definitely some interesting things here.
Yep.
Oh, you are still there. I thought for a minute maybe we had disconnected or something. I was like, oh my God, what happened to Michelle?
No, I'm still here. I was just trying to, I noticed in several early episodes that when you're talking, I tend to go, in the background. So I'm trying to do better about not doing that. So
right on.
It's that positive reinforcement when you're on the phone. So I was just kind of nodding along quietly. So
and I think that's about really all that needs to be said. Hey, we did make it to 17 minutes. I'm pretty impressed
I didn't
by
think
that.
that was going to happen. At all.
I should really have more faith in my ability to rant about things, I think, at the end of the day.
That's true.
No, if you don't know much about Boris Karloff, if you're a history nerd, if you like to know about people's lives, you're into biographies, that sort of thing, this is definitely worth checking out, especially if for no other reason than it dawned on me while I was watching this that Boris Karloff as Frankenstein's monster, that goes beyond movie star, right? That is transcendent cultural icon stuff now. Every pop culture representation of Frankenstein's monster you've seen since Karloff as the monster is more or less some kind of a riff on Karloff as the monster. That is such that is an icon status few people have ever achieved. And so this is definitely a story worth checking out. Just also keep in mind that it's only going to be so much.
One quick thing about Frankenstein, now that you mentioned that, I said I watched Frankenstein for the first time just a month or two ago before we even decided that we would be recording an episode about the documentary. And even though I had never seen it in its entirety, every single scene of that movie felt familiar because it has been used in pop culture in so many different ways. Whether you've seen Young Frankenstein or you've seen Bugs Bunny doing a bit that was based on Frankenstein, or if you've read something that references it, or anything in horror that has a scene based on that, there were so many things that I was like, oh, okay, so I've seen this before. I've seen this parodied. I've seen this. And it was just it was so wild to me how much of that I was familiar with despite never seeing the movie. It felt like there wasn't a single scene in there that was brand new to me.
Right. Yeah.
It's I've never had that experience with the movie before, and that was a very weird thing to feel. The other quick thing I just wanted to say is that it is the Christmas season, so if you're watching The Grinch, Boris Karloff was the narrator. So
Yes, he
tis
was.
the season, and you can go watch The Grinch and think of Boris. I'm sure he appreciates
Absolutely.
it wherever he is now.
For sure. So that's this bonus episode for you. We got the regular episode coming up this Friday morning. Michelle, it's the apology, right?
Yep. I know zero about it.
I still know absolutely nothing, and I am deliberately preventing myself from even looking at a trailer. We're going to go into this one totally blind. I'm super excited about it.
That's what I do every time. If I can avoid a trailer, I do it. If I can avoid an article, I just want a name and a release date. That's all I want. I don't watch trailers of things, even if it's something I'm very excited for. I did make an exception. I watched the Death Stranding 2 announcement trailer this week. I did freak out. It is probably the most excited a trailer has ever made me. But aside from that, I am mostly a trailerless person. I watch it after I watch the movie because I'm already excited. I'm going to watch it.
Isn't Death Stranding 2 a video game?
Yeah, but it has a trailer.
Okay.
They still do trailers for video games. Where have you been? It got me so excited. I just need more low roar music in my life. I want my low roar soundtrack to accompany Death Stranding 2, but I think the artist in the Death Stranding 2 trailer was not low roar. I don't want to look it up in case I stumble across any other information, but it doesn't sound like the singer from Low Roar, and I'm really upset. I hope that it is just an album of low roar music. I feel very passionate about and this is why I can't watch trailers. I get really upset about things before I've even seen or experienced them.
I'm just still trying to figure out how you have a trailer for a video game, but that's okay. I'll take your word for it. I'm an old man.
I'll send you the first Death Stranding trailer. It is a horror movie in and of itself. It is incredible. It stars Mads Mikkelsen. Guillermo del Toro plays a guy who is Frankenstein's monster. He's I forgot what his name is, but he's based on Frankenstein. He's got stitches across his head because his brain was removed. Oh, it's so good.
So these are all like things that happen like in the cutscenes in the game?
Yeah. Yeah, you should play Death Stranding. It
So,
changed
like,
my life. I will defend it till I die.
Here's my all right, as long as we're on this topic, we're going to do it.
Yep.
Little bonus here at the end for the people who've stuck around.
Mm-hmm.
Why not then just put all those cutscenes together and make a movie?
So I actually have an answer for you about that, because here's the thing. Death Stranding, you basically can do that, and it's still like 8 hours of footage of just cutscene of unplayable game. That's why people hate that game, but I love it so much. You think you're done, and then you've got 3 more hours of movie. You can just watch the cutscenes from Death Stranding and get the story, and it's so good. You just miss out on all the fun of traversing across a country with just a backpack on your back as music is playing, and you're trying to avoid these people who are trying to steal your parcels, and you're just trying to reconnect America. You're trying to bridge those strands. I love it. People called it a walking simulator, and you know what? I don't walk in real life, so walking in a video game was fine by me.
You a blind man named Eli carrying a book?
Oh. Maybe in Death Stranding 2. Who knows?
Maybe so.
Anything's possible.
I don't know how we do it. Every time, Michelle, we were like, this is going to be a 10-minute episode. It's now 24 minutes. Guys, check us out.
I made the mistake of mentioning Death Stranding, and I feel very passionately about Death Stranding. So
that's fair enough.
It's my own fault.
Guys, make sure you check us out on all the social medias. Well, 4 of the social medias: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. We're at We Watch Shudder. You can drop us an email. The address is mail@wewatchshudder.com. Make sure you check out wewatchshudder.com. That's our official website. And yeah, I think that's about it. Say goodnight, Michelle.
Good night, Michelle.